It's
Oh,
been a
really?
while. Yeah.
What happened?
Because I had my coaching business and the podcast was for my coaching business. And then I burned that business down. And so when I burned that down, I decided to burn the podcast down too.
Are we allowed to talk about that or no? Should we
Yeah,
keep
no,
it
we
off the
totally
table?
can. No, I'm happy to share like my journey of just
Okay.
like all the transitions that I've gone through in my career.
Hi, Tiff. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
I'm stoked that you're here. We planned this, I think, like a month ago, maybe just over a month ago, and it feels like time has just completely flown by, like it does.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
totally.
Tiff Cheng is from Vancouver, or you're in Vancouver now, and you have an online business. We're going to get into that. And you also have a background in interior design. You did go to interior design school. So we connected online and we just started chit-chatting, I think, in like, I can't remember if like I reached out to you or you reached out to me in the DMs, but I
Yeah.
think that's how like most relationships happen now is like on Instagram in the DMs.
Yeah, 100%. I just like whenever people are doing cool stuff, I'm just like, hi, let's connect. Like I want to chat with you.
I love it though because I think we need people like you because I think in the back of my mind I'm like I am that person and I'm gonna do that and then I don't end up doing it and then I regret not doing that, so I'm really actually grateful that you did reach out. I remember we were talking a little bit just before I was launching my course. I asked you, I was like, hey, can I pick your brain about pricing? Like, what do you
Yeah.
think about this? And you were so gracious. You responded with some actual information and you left me a voice memo, which I think is so. Here's a little tip for everyone listening. Like, if you're in
Yeah.
someone's DMs, like, and you leave a voice memo, my goodness, like, you stood out from everybody
Thank
else
you.
because nobody, it's that personal touch. So
100%.
I'm sure that's a marketing ploy, and you'll probably give us some tips later.
Yeah, and I think like I'm just a talker, so I'm just like if I don't have to type something out, I'd rather just like voice note it and just like
Yeah.
connect in that way and just make it feel conversational.
It's
So,
easier for sure, but I think it's just like that little personal touch is what got me. And I'm like,
mhm.
oh, I want to talk to this girl more and I want to know what she's
Yeah.
doing. And then so we scheduled a Zoom call like this with coffee one morning, like a month or so ago, and we just were talking and sharing our stories. And I thought, you know what? I want to have you on Design Life Inc. Live Chat. I forget the name of my own podcast.
Yeah.
Edit this part. That's cool. I want to have you on live chat with me so that we can talk a little bit more about your story and how you segued into the interior design industry, but then how you segued out of it
Mhm.
not too long after you got into it. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about By Tiff C and where it all started. Where did you go to design school?
Yeah, for sure. So, I have always loved design. So, my mom actually wanted to be an interior designer when she was younger. And so, when I was young, she would just like bring me to like show homes and like model houses, and like our table, coffee table would just be like filled with design magazines. And I feel like that was kind of like my first, I guess, like look into design. And I think like I just had my eyes set on going to design school ever since I was really young. And so I was the kid who, when everyone was studying math and business, I was the one in design school. And most of my friends in like the area that I grew up in were Asian. And so it was very like not normal for someone who was Asian to be studying something creative. And there was like a lot of like
Mm.
unpacking that I had to do of just like accepting that I don't know if the word is like I'm different, but just I'm just not going to be going down the same path that everyone else is. And
Yeah.
so I ended up getting into the Kwantlen Bachelor of Interior Design program. It's a pretty competitive program. Only 20 people get in every single year. And so I was like really grateful that I got in. And I spent like my entire grade 12 year just like preparing my portfolio to be able to get into design school. Studied there for 4 years and graduated in 2016. And that's when I started to become an interior designer and work in the industry.
So it's a 4-year program.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
your
And
program.
did you get any breaks off or was it like completely intensive all the way through?
We had summers off, but during the summers we would have to take like other courses to actually like complete graduation that weren't a part of like our interior design courses. Because I think we still had to take, I want to say like 6 or 7 courses
Mhm.
throughout the year that were just like other things that are not design.
Which I think is like that's hilarious. Let's talk about school for a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's like I think it's good that you have to have electives to a point, but then I also feel like if you're not going into sociology or
Oh, they were useless.
English or creative writing or I don't know what. I'm just making this up, right? I
Yeah.
feel like, man, like what a that's a lot of money and a lot of
Yeah.
time that's outside of like the specialty that you're focusing on in terms
Yeah.
of why you're at school even. We
Totally.
had to do that too. I remember sitting, so funny story for me, I suck at math. Like math is the I cannot do math. And the more designers that I talk to, we're all the same. Math is like our
Yeah.
nemesis, right? So I graduated out of high school. Like I had, I think 4 or 5 extra credits. Um,
Mm.
except I failed like my grade 12 math in the first semester with a tutor and all this
Oh
extra time. And the math teacher I had was such a putz. He like failed me with like a 48%. I'm like, really?
no.
Really? So I'm panicking, thinking like I have 1 semester left to pass math. There is no way I'm gonna pass grade 12 math. What can I do? So I begged the accounting teacher who was teaching accounting to let
Yeah.
me switch into accounting. And I think it was like the
Mm.
last year in the curriculum in Manitoba that you were able to substitute like a math credit
Oh,
for an
math.
accounting credit. That is the only reason I graduated high
Oh my
school.
God.
I think I'd still be in there if they required grade 12 math. So
Yeah.
yeah, so this has like been hanging over my head my entire life. And so I applied to get into Mount Royal in Calgary and I got in, but there was like a condition. And the condition was I had to pass like their math, whatever 101. And I was like, oh dear
Oh
Lord,
my
I'm not even
God.
gonna go. Why even bother? I'm not gonna pass. Like I'll never, they're gonna kick me out. And my
Yeah.
mom was like, just go, just try, just see what happens. And I'm like, "Arr." So I moved to Calgary. I start my first year and I get into the math 101. And it turns out there were like 3 other designers from our program that were also in math
Mm.
101 that
Oh,
also had to do the same thing. So
yeah.
it wasn't just me, thank God. But it turns out it wasn't about like actual math, doing math. It was like the history of math and like the history of mathematicians. And like I
Oh my
loved
God.
it because it wasn't actual math. And I think I
Math.
got like
Yeah.
a B plus. So I was like, woo,
Yeah.
I could stay in university and like finish my program. But
Yeah.
oh my God, it almost never happened.
I know. It's like it's so crazy that they make you take all these electives. I think for us, we had to mandatory take an English elective, and it's like we all know how to speak English.
Yeah.
So, and you ended up writing like essays in it. And I'm like, when are you ever gonna have to write an essay in
Yeah.
design school? And then there were some other electives that we could take, and then I just ended up taking all like arts electives. So I took like a photography class, a film class. I
Oh,
took like yeah, like all like
those are
artsy
good. Those
stuff.
aren't
So
boring.
that is what I did to
Mm,
graduate. I was like, I don't want to do anything that's like too technical.
yeah. Well, tell me a bit about, let's like share our stories here too about school. Tell me a bit about when you were finishing school and you're thinking, cool, I have this 4 year degree. I'm going to be an interior designer.
Yeah.
We all, I think, go into university thinking like we're going to be taught everything there is that we need to know about operating as a designer in the real world. And like when we leave, so many of us are just like, we get the shock of our lives because we realize we know like this much
Yeah.
instead of this much. And the things that were so important or that they hammered down our throats in school, yes, sure, we do get into it and use it out in the real world, but
Hmm.
it's like hardly ever. And so
Yeah.
many things I'm finding like years later, so many things that just aren't taught in school. What was your experience like after that?
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit because
Yeah.
even when I was in school, I remember just like thinking all the time, like, when are we actually going to learn like the technical stuff
Mm,
when it comes to being an interior designer? Because I think that was one of the things that I really felt was lacking in my school. Like, we literally spent the entire first year doing like painting and sculpturing. And like we didn't do AutoCAD, like there's nothing. We did hand drafting, and I'm like,
mhm,
I see value in learning hand drafting.
mhm.
But besides that, the whole first year was just more like an art
Like arts
class.
class.
Yeah, and I remember there was like an assignment where we had to do painting, and it was like, let's say like there's from white to green, and then we had to paint like the gradient of like white to like dark green. And I'm like, how is this relevant to being an interior designer, like at
Yeah.
all? It makes no sense. And so I really feel like when I was in school, we had a lot of just like wasted time on things that really didn't allow us to get into the nitty gritty of actually like what it's like to be an interior designer.
Mhm.
And I think one of the biggest skill sets that I really felt like I was lacking coming out of design school is really understanding how things are built and like understanding like sections and details and stuff. And it's like we were taught that, but not to a degree where it can actually be applied to real world
Hmm.
in like a design firm.
Hmm. Yeah, same. I relate to that. I don't know what year it was. It was maybe like the end of year two, maybe the beginning of year three for us. Like it
Hmm.
was well into the program where we had an architect come in and he was one of our profs. So he taught us, I think it was like building construction or
Yeah.
convention. I can't remember the name of the course. And I think it's such a blur. Like I'm like, maybe I'm making this up. No, I think it happened.
Yeah.
I think that we were going to one of their sites somewhere in Calgary, maybe in like the Mount Royal area. And we're able to see sort of like when the footings were being put in and like foundation was
Mm.
being poured and like there were stages I think that we did end up going, although I don't know. Yeah, I think so. I think so. But other than that, like you kind of like you buy the textbooks and you get through them and
Hmm.
like there's drawing standards, drawing conventions. But yes, I think there's a huge gap between like knowing how to draw something, but truly understanding like how is this going to
How
be
it's all
built
built.
in the real
Hmm.
world?
Yeah.
Or can this even be built? Or
Yeah.
is this even possible? Like there's so many steps I feel in layers that, and I know they try and cram everything in like 3 years, 4 years max if you're doing like a degree program, which is
Yeah.
so crazy. Because I feel like it wasn't until maybe 5 or 6 years after I left school that I
Hmm.
started to grasp some of this myself. Like it took a long
Totally.
time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a way for them to change it or make it better or take
Yeah.
out the fluffy crap that, sure, we need some color theory and we need some textures and materials courses, but yeah,
Not
yeah,
that
I don't know.
much.
I
Yeah.
don't
I
know.
feel like the technical side of things is a lot more important and like a lot more practical.
Yeah.
And at least like in the program that I studied, first year was all just like theoretical, like art and
Hmm.
design. And then second year was residential. And then third year was commercial, but we did one healthcare project, one restaurant project, and one retail project, all crammed in third year. And then
Hmm.
fourth year was our capstone project. And so it almost feels like we weren't even able to dive super deep into specific disciplines of design because I feel like, let's say, if you want to get into hospitality and restaurants, the skill set that you need for that is so different
Hmm.
than if you were to be a residential interior designer. And it's almost like there wasn't enough time to even go super deep into each of those disciplines because the
Hmm.
first year was just like wasted. And then the fourth year is your capstone project. So
And that's
technically,
all
you
you're
only have
focusing
two.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you technically only have 2 years to really learn everything that you need to know about all disciplines of interior design, all crammed into the 2 years.
Hmm. I know it's crazy. And then they like turn us loose into the world and they're like, here you go.
Yeah.
Go do it. I feel though, and I mean, tell me what you think. I feel though that even this is for me. So I went in 2000 to 2000, the end of 2003. We had like our first semester, or sorry, our first year, we had the summer off. And then the next 2.5 years we were in full time. Like we had no breaks. We had
Mhm.
practicums. So there was like a work term that we had to do.
Yeah.
There was two of them. But I mean, you're still doing school projects like for that practicum. You're working for someone else.
Yep.
You're doing their work, like their design work. So it was like full time. It was just full time. It
Yep.
was madness. But I feel like even back then, and then compared to today, the designers that I talk to that graduate, it still sounds like the goal and like what they're pushing in design school is for everyone to leave school, go find a big firm and like
Hmm.
work for a firm. And that is where they're going to teach you all the things that you didn't get in school. But I don't feel like that's the path for so many
No.
designers. Like, and honestly, there's other than a few like big sort of long-term names, there really aren't a lot of like big designer architecture firms anymore. Like everyone has segmented and
No.
gone off on their own, or
Totally.
just like left school like I did and was like, I don't really want to work for anybody.
Yeah.
Is it okay? Like, is it okay for me to do my own thing? Am I allowed to? Like, because it just felt so against what school had kind of like, you know,
Hmm.
indoctrinated. That's the only word I can come up with, really, is like
Yeah.
brainwashed us into thinking was that if you want to be a real designer, a legit designer, the pathway to that was like going to work for someone else and like
Hmm.
starting as a junior and then working your way up. And
Going.
like if
Yep.
that's your path, awesome. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think today that is just so not what so many people are doing.
Hmm. Yeah. And they don't teach you anything about running your own business as an interior designer. I don't know about you, but like we didn't learn anything about like budgets
Mm-mm.
or
Same.
like contracts
No,
or
no, they didn't.
any of that
We
stuff.
learned a bit about like like a little bit about process and kind of like the phases, but if I can think
Yeah.
again, like this is all just a dream in my memory now. I really don't
Yeah.
think there was much even in terms of like how a project like runs, like the
Hmm.
steps or phases in a build. Like a little bit, yes, but not enough to be like,
Yeah.
oh, cool, I understand. Not at all. It was more about like, okay, so how do you do the floor plans? How do you do the
Yes.
elevations? How do you create all the design documentation? Like that is for sure we learned in our sleep how to do
Hmm.
that. But past
Hmm.
the point of like handing that over and getting quotes or like
Yes.
handing it over to a contractor, zero clue
Yes.
what happened
Yeah.
after.
I was gonna say they teach you all of like the CAD drawing stuff, but
Mhm.
like they don't really teach you all of the other players that come into play when
Mhm.
it comes to actually building an entire project from like start to finish. So like with like architects, engineers, or like even like with the city to get permits, like we didn't really
Yes.
cover too much
No.
of that, or like when like how long permits typically take, because at least in Vancouver, sometimes they take like 2, 3 months or even longer. And it's like
Mhm.
it's more like the real life practical knowledge that I don't think was really taught. And so when you go out into the real world, you're like, wow, this is a rude awakening that I literally know nothing except for how to draw CAD drawings.
I still, I'm like, I have beef. I have major beef with that because I'm thinking like, you spend so much money, you invest like an intensive amount of time. It is grueling. I think a lot of the
Hmm.
public has no clue. They think we go to school and we just like pick
Draw.
colors and
Yeah. And like,
carpet.
yeah.
Like, oh, we have a fun job, and it doesn't make like it's not very
Yeah, I
serious.
know.
And like they just have zero clue what goes into like a 4 year or 3 year program. Um,
Yeah.
and then yes, to leave and kind of think like, oh great, now I can like go out into the world and go forth and prosper. And like, no.
Yeah.
You're like a slap. You have like a wake up call where you're like, oh my God, I don't know anything. What do I do?
Yeah.
So it's not me, it's not you. It's like so many
No.
people that I talk to, they have the exact same experience. And I don't know what it's going to take for design school to kind of like shift with the times and, kind of come into
Hmm.
like 2024 with the curriculum because it just seems so antiquated.
Yeah. And it's interesting because my year was actually the year where we were the guinea pigs for a new curriculum.
Mm,
And so we I think we would have part of our curriculum as like the old curriculum, and they were trying to transition to this new curriculum. And even then it just wasn't it. And I almost wish that as students, we'd be able to actually like sit our instructors down and be like, after the
this
four
is what we
years,
need.
this is what we need so
Yeah.
that you guys can actually make the curriculum better for
Yeah.
like other people.
Yeah.
And that just, yeah, was never the case.
That would make sense. Come to think of it, like I've never, what would be so nice, and I don't think they'll ever do it, is like if universities, after you graduate, like 1 to 2 years later, they connect with you again and they send out a
Hmm.
survey and they're like, so what about your program was beneficial? What did you
Yeah.
like feel was lacking? What did you need more of? Like no one asks for feedback when it comes to our education.
No.
And yet we have a lot of feedback that we could give that would actually be helpful for
Helpful.
future
Hmm.
generations and graduates. But
Yeah.
oh well,
Yeah.
we'll just have to, I don't know, someone's gonna have to create like the new school of interior
You're gonna
design.
have to do it.
Do you find though that like the profs, and not to knock all the profs, but
Yeah, totally.
were the profs in your program, were they practicing designers? Had they like had their
Mm.
own successful firms? Were they, like long-term like career profs that obviously like finished a
Mm.
design program?
Yeah,
Like
that's a
what
great
was that
question.
experience like?
I think out of all of the instructors that I had, I want to say there was only one instructor who was still a practicing
Mm,
designer, and
mm,
everyone else was just like worked in the industry for a while and then decided to transition into like being a prof. And so I think that's that instructor specifically, I will say that I think he did bring in a lot of like his own personal experience. And so that was really helpful to just like get his perspective, even though it wasn't like teaching maybe like practical stuff, but just really understanding like, oh, like I just had this project and like these are the things that I had to go through. Like these are the challenges that came up. These are the
mhm.
design problems that we are trying to solve. And like, here's how we solve for them. And
Yeah.
I almost feel like that's more valuable than just like reading a textbook. You know, it's just like really
Really?
hearing like someone's real life example
Hmm.
of something. But now that you're mentioning it, it's a really good point because there was only one instructor who was actually a practicing
Hmm. I
designer
think
and
that has
everyone else
something,
wasn't.
I think that has a lot to do with it. I know in our program we had, I think it was like a mix. It was, I would say it's like 50-50 because they'd bring in like
Mm,
guest prof or they weren't
yeah.
like full time on staff. They were just sort of like for the course or for the semester. And a lot of them came from their own practices or they're working
Mm,
with a business or a firm. So we did have that, but I think like some of the long standing like full time they had been out of it for years.
years. Yeah.
And I mean, they're great, like lovely. I can think of a few of them, and they were
Totally.
genuinely like lovely, good people. I'm not
Yeah.
knocking that. But I think there's something to be said about, working in the business and then working on the
Hmm.
business. So that type of cliche, transfers over into like who's teaching the future generation of interior designers and kind of like their
Yeah.
real life experiences. And like if they're a little stale or they haven't been in the industry for a little bit as a practicing designer, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast recently. I forgot who it was. I want to say it was the IDCO podcast, and I don't remember who she was interviewing specifically,
Mhm.
but I remember one of the designers was saying that she actually doesn't care if someone applies to work with her and they have a degree or diploma in interior design. What she cares more about is just like their willingness to learn, because I think she just realized that interior design is such a discipline where you basically learn everything by doing. And obviously there's like skill set that can be trained through like AutoCAD and like the more, I guess, like drawing tools, but
Yeah.
everything else can literally be learned
Hmm.
by just being in the industry. And so I thought that was really interesting too, where at least for me, when I applied for interior design school, I was like, it's either I study bachelor's of interior design or I don't. Like there's like no in between. And I think it was so ingrained in me that like you have to go to a bachelor's school that's CETA accredited and then take the NCIDQ to be considered a legit interior
Right.
designer.
Hmm.
And I feel like there's so many examples of it in the industry now where that's not the case. Like there's so many large name designers that don't even have a bachelor's of interior design or
Hmm.
haven't taken the
Or they're
NCIDQ or aren't an
self-taught.
RID. Yeah. And there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that because you learn everything on the job. It's a very
Yeah.
like hands-on industry to be in.
Yes, and I think it also depends on like what your goals are. Like if you leave school and you think I want to go work for a commercial firm or
Yes.
they're doing government contracts and you need to be licensed. I think definitely there's a place for all of the licensing, the NCIQ, like
Mm-hmm.
all of that, right? I think it just depends on like what your goals are. But if you
Mm-hmm.
leave and you're thinking like I don't know if I want to go work for someone else, I might do my own thing. I'm
Yeah.
going to stick to residential. No, you don't have to have like all of those. And
No.
I know people have their own opinions and some say, yes, you do. And it's continual learning and standards. Yes. But I feel like
Yeah.
if you like my path, like I think maybe 3 or 4 times over the last 20 years, I'm like, I should probably write that NCIDQ more as a personal goal. Like
Yeah.
have I ever had a client ever in 20 years say to me, Crispin, do you have your NCIQ? No, zero. And even like for
Yeah.
commercial jobs, no. Contractors, no.
Yeah.
Like no one cares.
No.
But I've made sure that I, continue to like learn. I continue to like
Yeah.
progress with the industry. That I've tried to maintain like a level of standard for myself in professional practice, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's all kind of like that really truly matters in most cases at the end of the day. And it's the
Yeah.
designers that don't and kind of get left behind, sadly. But if you're doing your own thing and you're, finding resources, you're listening to podcasts, you're reading books, you're attending lectures, like you're going to lunch and learns and P and
Mm-hmm.
what is it? P and K? P and K? P and Q? P and K. Product knowledge? PK. PKs.
Oh,
Oh my
I
God.
was like, what did you
You're
mention?
like, what are you saying?
What are you talking about?
It's like product, yeah, lunch and
Yeah,
learns,
product
like
knowledge.
product
Yeah.
PKs. I think they see industry
Yeah.
term, like I think they call them PKs. But you can learn and you can teach yourself. And then also for me, it's like my trades. My trades are my greatest asset because
Yes.
when you have like I'm looking out my window right now because one of my contractors is working over at my neighbor's house. So I gotta talk about my trades. They are the best. When you have a really good
Hmm.
working relationship with your trades, they teach you so many things
Everything.
on every
Yeah.
project and not just like sit you down and go through everything, just on site, asking questions, doing
Yeah.
walkthroughs. When you're able to go and like lean on your trades for questions for things that you just don't have
Hmm.
answers to, or you want to learn a little bit more about why something is the way it is, that's where you can get a lot of knowledge as well, is your
Yeah.
trades.
100%. I feel like so after I graduated from school, the first job that I had was as an interior designer at a design build firm. So not only was I an interior designer, I also was a project manager slash general contractor.
That's crazy.
And
Right out of
it's
school?
insane.
Holy
I
smokes.
know it's insane. But I will say, I mean, I have so much PTSD from that
Oh my
experience, just
God.
being like a young, like 20-year-old and like talking to like men that were like double my size and just being like, okay, like this is what we're gonna do. It
Yeah,
was very intimidating. But I will say, even though it was such a rough experience because I just felt like I was like thrown into things,
you
being
were.
on the general contracting side of things,
Mhm.
I would say is where I learned the most. Like I wouldn't even say I really grew or developed my design side of things, but it was being on job sites and really understanding, to your point, like the construction, talking to trades, that helped me kind of like, I guess, elevate all of my other skill sets because I finally understood like how things are actually built, how things work together, how
Mhm.
contractors work together, and
Mhm.
like how to, submit permits and like the different stages of like submitting permits and doing like inspections and how all of that kind of ties together
Yeah.
that we aren't taught in school. And even though it was from like a 0 to 100 experience, I learned so much on the
Yeah.
spot.
It's a crash course.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
The crash course and like how to do actually everything and how to run projects. And that's so scary. Oh my gosh. Did you ever feel
Yeah.
like talking to these trades that, you just like, did you just sort of fake it till you make it kind of thing? Or
Oh,
did you have moments where
100%.
you're like, oh my God, I don't actually know
Yeah.
what's happening and this is
A
not
hundred
working?
percent. I like in the back of my head, I was just always thinking like, these people probably think I'm like a freaking idiot. Like I have no idea
Oh,
what I'm talking about. And it's like, it was really overwhelming. But at the same time, I think kind of like tying to what you were saying, when you work with really good tradespeople, you
mhm.
build such a relationship with them. And it's almost like they became my mentors as well.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's really special when you have that. You need those. Like we need people like that in our lives, especially like I find the guys, because it's like a male dominated industry. We've
Yeah.
all had situations where we've worked with other contractors and we did not get like a reciprocal respect
Hmm.
or acknowledgement, and things just don't run smoothly, right? It's so nice to have the opposite when you have really good trades that, it is a reciprocal, respectful relationship and they're happy to
Hmm.
help and you're happy to help them and vice versa, right? It makes all the difference.
Yeah. I think it also helped that like they knew that at the company that I was at, what we were doing was not normal. And so
Oh,
I think they just really
I
like
feel bad.
emphasized. Yeah, I think they just
They're
really
like, let's just
emphasized
help
of
her
like,
out, that
you
poor
guys are
girl.
crazy. Like, I don't know how you
Oh,
guys are doing it all. But I think it was such a good learning experience. And even though obviously like I'm not, fully in design anymore, and even though I did feel very burnt out from that first job, I will always look back and say, holy shit, like that's where I learned
so
so much
much.
about the
Yeah.
industry because of that experience.
That's cool. So kind of traumatic, but also amazing at the same
Yes,
time.
I can always look back on it. And now, like, we're doing our house, and it's just cool to be able to like use that knowledge
Mm.
and expertise in our home too. Not that we're doing like a full build, but like even with like little renovations that we're
Yeah,
doing, I'm
yeah.
like, oh yeah, like
You
we
do
need to
know
talk
what
to
you're
this
doing.
trades and this person and this person. Yeah.
So you were with this company for about a year, I think, right?
Year and a half. Yeah.
And then after that, did you go work for another designer or where did you do after that?
Yeah, so worked at that firm for around a year and a half, and I actually just quit because it was just too much. Like I think I was handling at one point 12 projects as one
Straight
person,
out of school too.
straight out of
Oh my
school,
gosh.
as a designer and as a general
That's
contractor. So
insane.
it's insane. I remember like we would have like the big IMAX, and because I would be working home or working so late, I literally would lug the iMac back to my house,
Oh,
like a
oh,
whole freaking computer. Anyways, I
yeah,
got really burnt out and I
I bet.
decided to leave. And I obviously like feel super fortunate that I was just like in a position to just take a step back and be like, okay, like
Not
let's just
happening.
prioritize your mental health for a second. And I
Mhm.
also didn't take a break between school and working. Like a lot of my classmates took maybe like the summer off before
Yeah.
they started applying to jobs, but I had actually interned at that firm when I was a student. And so right after like literally like my final thesis presentation, they already wanted me full time. And so I had no break in between. It was like graduate and then bloop, got plopped
Crazy.
into work. Yeah. So
Crazy.
got
And
really
then
burnt
right
out.
into the fire. My gosh.
Yeah,
How many
totally.
designers, just quickly, how many designers worked at that firm? Like that were also doing what you were
Um,
doing?
yeah, when I was there, I think there was 3 or 4 of us,
Oh, wow.
all project managers and yeah, project managers, general contractors, and designers.
Did they give you sort of like any type of education on or like how this all works? This is our process, this is our software, this is what we expect of you. Like they
Nope.
literally just threw you in and be like, figure it out.
Yeah, so
That's
I think I
crazy.
don't want to like bad name the
No,
firm,
I
but
know.
I
We're
think
not.
the person who owns the company, I don't even really know what her experience is. Like she's not from Vancouver. And so I think she started the company and then started hiring really young talent. And so I learned everything I knew from the people that were working there, not from
Mm,
like the actual owner of the company. And it's almost like that's kind of the cycle that we all went through. It's like, and the turnover there is like crazy too. Like everyone, I
yeah.
would say like lasts like a year and a half and everyone's out then, or even
And
like
they're
six
all like
months.
down for the count, sadly.
Yeah, I have a
Oh.
friend who I met from there and we're still friends to this day. And she worked there for 2 weeks and she was just like, peace,
Oh
I'm out.
no. Oh
But
no. Jeez, that's
yes. So
crazy.
basically the like how the cycle works is like you join the company and then the people who have been there like the longest just teach you and like show you the ropes. And then
Yeah.
they eventually leave and then you end up just like
Then
teaching
you're
other
the person.
people.
You're the
So
trainer.
if you're asking about like was there any like formal training or yeah, there was none of that. It
That's too
was just
bad.
like learn on the job. But
Can you imagine though
hey,
if you had someone who was like office manager or project manager and then their job was to actually kind of like maybe not spend a ton of time but at least a little bit of time showing you
mhm.
how things worked, what they expected of you, who to go talk to, and then like what the process was, these are the templates that we use, like any of that. Can you
Yeah.
imagine how much more successful and less stressed
Yeah.
you would have felt?
Everyone would be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
So
sad. I've
worked
heard
there
this
for
before though. Like you're not the only, this isn't the only story I've heard of this. This is so
yeah,
common. I think so many people
it's
think,
so
oh,
common.
I'm gonna open a design business. And then they start getting work or they get, they have contacts. So they have projects and then they need people to execute the work because they themselves can't, maintain
Yeah.
it themselves. So they bring in people, but because they're like running at like warp speed, there isn't time to kind of properly onboard someone, get them feeling comfortable, set them up for success. There's a lot of
Hmm.
designers that get into a company in the same situation, maybe not as crazy as what you experienced, because that seems
Yeah.
like next level, but
Yeah.
the expectations are just so high. And then the like timelines are so short and they just don't feel like
Hmm.
there's that level of self-satisfaction in what they're producing because they're not even sure if what they're doing is
Yeah.
correct or, it's so sad.
Yeah. I think the other thing with that too is that I just like feel like I got PTSD from the design
Mm,
industry altogether. And it's almost like that being my first experience made
yeah.
me not want to be an interior designer at all. And I should even add, on top of being a project manager, general contractor, and designer, we also did furniture procurement too.
Oh
So there was
gosh.
also like another, and that's like a whole other
All of those
discipline too.
things are like 4 different roles
Different
within a
jobs.
business, not for one person. Like you could easily fill a position with 4 different people to do all of
Yeah.
that. Oh, that's
Totally. So
crazy. That's so
I think
sad.
it does really suck because I really wonder if that wasn't my first experience in interior design, if I still would be, a practicing
Mhm.
interior designer right now. But I think I just like became very allergic to being an interior designer.
I understand why though. I mean, yeah, who's to say? Unfortunately, that was your first experience, but I
Yeah.
think no, I think if you'd had someone else, that was more realistic with what, the expectation was for a brand new, like fresh out of school, like
Fresh grad. Yeah.
grasshopper, and then could
Literally.
provide the mentorship and provide the education piece as to like how things run in a company and
Hmm.
give you the space to kind of like come into that and like nurture you through that. I think your experience would have been obviously
Hmm.
completely different. And who's to say like down the road maybe you won't like dip your toes again or
Yeah.
things might shift, but I can definitely understand needing like a break after burning out so hard
Hmm.
and fast like that to just be like, no. not gonna do it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I took a break for I want to say around like 3 or 4 months. And I was like still applying to jobs. And then I ended up landing at Heritage, who's like a furniture distributor for Steelcase. So
Mhm.
very, very opposite change of pace. It's almost like the first design firm was just like chaos. And working at Heritage was
Yeah.
just like complete peace. It was like I could just like be at my desk and just like not take my time with things, but it just the discrepancy level between the two
Yeah.
were so vast that it was
Yeah.
such a nice change of pace
I
to
bet.
be able to just kind of like move at a slower pace and still work kind of in the design space, but not actually like being a designer.
No, it makes total sense. And then you kind of like shifted out of that and did something different. What happened then?
Yeah, so I was working at Heritage and I've always wanted to start like my own business, whether it's like a full-time thing or just like a side hustle. And I've always really just loved the content creation, like online space. And so I really wanted to start a blog, specifically about like health and nutrition, because that's always been something that I'm really passionate about. And so I was like, well, I have no idea how to start a blog or anything in the online space at all. And so I signed up to work, or I signed up for a digital marketing certificate at a school in Vancouver. It was like a 10-week crash course on digital marketing. And I was doing this on top of when I was working at Heritage. It was like a weekend thing.
Hmm.
And then after I finished that 10 weeks, I was like, oh, I actually really, really like this.
Hmm.
And so I started to apply to digital marketing jobs while I was still working at Heritage and then landed a job. And that's when I left Heritage and totally pivoted my career into digital marketing. So it did like a whole, I guess, like 180 or 360 or however you want to call it,
Yeah.
and moved out of the design industry.
And so it's digital, you got into the digital marketing space. And like, was it
Mhm.
for interior design? Did you start in interior design or
No, it
like
wasn't
something
at
different?
all. Completely different. So the company that I worked for specialized in conversion rate optimization. And to basically put it in layman's terms, it's imagine going to Lululemon
Hmm.
and you will see, let's say, one version of the homepage, but your husband sees another version of the homepage. And it's actually a marketing strategy for us to test which variations do better
Hmm.
and promote more sales, and really like rolling those experiences out. And so we would run these like experiments to like on these websites to see which ones perform better, do like the reporting for all of that, and then kind of keep reiterating on that process for pretty large companies
That's
out there, like Fortune
interesting.
500 companies.
Oh, no
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So what was like some of the like data? What was some of the things that you guys in doing those experiments, like what came out of
Mhm.
that and like showed you a little bit more into this
Yeah.
marketing
There
aspect?
is so much that goes into it, and it really depends on the business. And that's why there's no, like, I guess, like blanket one size fits all approach. But I would say one of the biggest things that we also did was like user research and really understanding like what makes people tick.
Mhm.
And I think to no surprise, like the easier things are to navigate and the more simple it is, the better it is. And it's almost like so many businesses and brands out there try to just do too much or like make things like too fancy or too exclusive. And it's almost like it's at a detriment to your business because it's just not clear. People can't get around. And so that was like one of the biggest findings, which is like so simple, but it's almost like you have to go through the
Yeah.
process of like complicating things to then uncomplicate things.
Yes. We are so by nature because we're just into the details and like I don't know, we live on a different planet, some of us, some designers, right? Like we overcomplicate things. And like
Yeah.
when someone like outside eyes kind of is able to show us how to deconstruct and like pare it
Hmm.
down and take it back to the basics. It is so simple, but we just don't see it because we're not like back there.
Yeah.
We're kind of like up over here and we have 100 things going on at one time. So
Yeah.
yeah, we make things unnecessarily complicated sometimes.
Yeah, and it was really cool because at the company that I was working at, it was it was digital marketing, and so it is very, I guess, like technical and like
Mhm.
strategic and like numbers driven. But there, like the other part of it was still design driven because we're still designing experiences, and so it's almost like I moved from designing experiences in the real world to the digital space. And so it was really cool to be able to still flex that like creativity side of things and still be able to feel like I'm designing, but just in a different way.
Yeah, you're still being able to creative and like you're being able
Hmm.
to flex that creative muscle, which is so important
Yeah.
for people like us, for sure. So when did you
Yeah.
go off and start doing your own thing?
I'm like, I feel like I've lived like 5, 10 lives already in the
Oh,
span of like a few years. Cause then after that, so I was
yeah.
working at that company and then I started another business, which was a coaching business. And so it was mainly working with other people that are in a 9 to 5 service providers that are wanting to just monetize something outside of their 9 to 5 and basically just showing people what I did. And so I did business coaching for side hustlers and I did that for around 3 years while working in my 9 to 5. And once that was able to kind of, I guess, like sustain my full time income, I decided to leave that 9 to 5 and pursue that full time. And I did that for a year full time before I also burnt that down.
Oh,
I think that's like my story. It's just like I do things and then I don't like it. And so I burn it down.
I thought you're like, that's done. We're done with that. Oh
Yeah,
my
that's like
gosh.
the next era. And then there's
Yeah.
like new eras that are coming.
But okay, would did something like specific happen for you to burn it down? Or did you just kind of realize like, no, this isn't what I want to do and I'm pivoting again and I'm just
Yeah.
doing something different?
I think a few things. So when I got into the coaching industry, it was like peak COVID and it was like the boom of the coaching
Hmm.
industry. Like anyone who got into the coaching space at that time, I would say like if you had a good marketing background and like knew how to create good content, you
Hmm.
would be able to make money. It was a lot more simple back then.
Hmm.
But as kind of COVID went on and more people started to kind of get into the space, it became a lot more saturated. And with
Okay.
saturation also means quality kind of decreases too. It's like kind of like a product life cycle, right? Like as things kind of go on, there's decline in demand, there's decline in actual like quality of things. And I just found myself feeling like there were so many people that were trying to get into the coaching industry that it diluted the I guess like the potency of it
Mhm.
in a sense where everyone started calling themselves a coach. Everyone
Yes.
was telling you like, I'm going to teach you how to make $100,000 in 6 months. And
Oh,
that
yes.
just doesn't
Or like the
resonate with
6K,
me.
7K, like the whole tagline
Yeah,
behind
it's
like
just like,
7K
oh, yeah,
business.
totally. And it's all like numbers driven and it's all just like, how can you make as much money as
Hmm.
you can? And it's just not really the way that I like to operate my life. Like integrity is like, I would say like my top biggest value. And it almost felt like I was losing a piece of myself and I didn't feel like I was in integrity with like who I am anymore. And I think it's easy to fall into the trap when everyone around you is just like, let's just keep going. Like, let's just like
Yeah.
keep growing the business and making money. And
Mhm.
it was a very successful business, but I think I just had to take a step back and be like, I just don't think
This
it's
is for
really in
me.
alignment for who I am and just like my core beliefs. And it was really hard to walk away from like, multi 6 figure business, but I was just like, I
Yeah.
rather just be in full integrity with who I am than to run a business that I'm not really passionate about.
I mean, it's sad that, you kind of had to like we like you say burn it all down, right? But
Hmm.
but that's the thing is like when you're not in alignment with, who you are and your values and your morals and your integrity, like it doesn't matter how successful things are or how much money's coming
Yeah.
in, like you don't have peace and you're always kind of, at war with yourself a little bit about what you're doing and then I think eventually that trickles through into what you're actually doing. And,
Hmm.
your energy changes, people around you change. Yeah, money isn't everything.
It isn't.
And like when you don't have it and you think, especially I'm just kind of relating to like designers starting out and they think like, when I have a lot of projects and I have more money in my bank
Hmm.
account and like I'll have all these things and I'll feel better and I'll feel more at peace and less
Hmm.
stressed. And like, sure, there's benefits that come with, bigger projects, bigger budgets, more profit for you. Yes. However, like you just said, though, if you're not in alignment with what you're doing, like truly at your core, doesn't matter how much money comes in, like you just don't have that sense of
Hmm.
peace and confidence and just like clarity as you're moving through the world.
Yeah, totally. It's not worth it. I think your personal peace and sanity is not worth any money
Mhm.
you make. And I feel like at the end of the day, most of us go into business because we actually want to just have a better life for ourselves outside of work. And it's almost like we make
The
work
opposite.
our entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just didn't want to do that anymore.
Mhm. So, okay, so you stopped that. and then
Yeah,
took a
burn
little
that
break.
down.
Okay.
I actually didn't take a break. I just like burned that down and like slowly transitioned into brand and web, which was like my next, I guess, era or evolution of
Like you're
things.
2.0, 3.0. It's all good.
Yeah, and it's like I think it's cool because when I started my brand and web design business, I feel like I've already talked about like five careers, but started my brand and web design business, and it was cool because again, it really combined my passion for both more of like the strategic technical side of things that's also required in like interior design, but also
Mhm.
in marketing, and then combine my passion for like design. And so I started a brand and web design business. And fortunately, I already had a lot of the skill set needed to start a brand and web design business because of the experience that I had working in digital marketing for the website side of things. But then in design school, like I had to use Illustrator and I had to use Photoshop and all of those things. And so it's almost like I didn't have to relearn how to do
Thankfully.
all of those
Yeah.
things. I already knew how to do that. It was more
Yeah.
just like learning the process of how to walk a client through like a, full branding project. But yeah, I kind of like slowly transitioned into doing brand and web and then burned that coaching business fully down. And even within branding and websites, I have kind of switched my niches a few times. Like I started working with a lot of like beauty, fashion, and lifestyle brands, and more like in the kind of like D2C space and in the e-commerce space. And then decided that I didn't really want to do that. And then I transitioned into helping with interior designers
Hmm.
specifically
Hmm.
because it's an industry that I
You're familiar
know
with.
really well and I
Yeah.
just love it. And so that has been my kind of like recent evolution. So still doing like brand and web, but have transitioned into different niches. And there's another evolution that is coming as well. I feel like I'm just a person that just like tries things and just when it doesn't feel right, I'm just like, I just pivot. And my friends are always like, you're pretty quick to just like I
Pivot.
don't know,
Pivot.
pivot and just like, and still like, it still
What?
works
I
for
think no,
some
but this is the
reason.
beauty of it, right? Like think of the opposite. Think of how many people that we know are stuck in jobs that they like hate, or like our
Hmm.
parents. Like it was the whole that was their generation was like
Yeah.
you go to university or you don't. You work, you start up at a company, you stay with that company for like 30, 40 years till you
Hmm.
retire. And that's the measure of success. And like how many people were just freaking miserable, not
Hmm.
fulfilled, not doing what they, or at least not trying to figure out what they want to do in life and figure things out. So I think it's actually awesome. I don't see it as like a negative at all. Like I
Yeah.
see it as you're truly committed to finding what it is you want to do. And maybe that's only for 6 months to a year. And then you want to do something else. Like there's
Hmm.
beauty in
Hmm.
that too. I think that's to
Yeah.
be commended, not kind of like, oh, I'm
Thank
moving
you.
again or I'm shifting again. Because like think of the
Yeah,
opposite. The other alternative is like staying with something and not you like what if you had
totally.
stayed in that first job with that company and
I
it had to like
know.
completely like break down because it's just not sustainable.
Hmm.
But you
Hmm.
thinking like, well, this is the path to starting my career and figuring out what I want to do. I have to stay here to do this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like tough it out, stick it out, and like
Yeah.
damage yourself.
Yeah, I almost feel like I had a lot of shame around like pivoting multiple times, but I think I've just really embraced that as part of my identity. And I
Good.
realized that I am just like a multi-passionate person. I'm like a very creative person. And I feel like with that, it just comes with continuously like learning what feels more aligned and just like embracing that as part of the journey.
Mhm.
Like I just know my path is never going to be linear. And like if that's the path for you, that's like amazing. But I just know that's just not me. And there's so
Yeah.
many other people out there that that's not our journey either. It's just it's
Mhm.
windy and twisty and squiggly and just
Yeah.
confusing
I think that's
at
normal,
times.
but for some reason, society kind of has like up until now frowned upon that and kind of like,
Oh,
oh, you're not
100%.
committed or you're not serious about your life or
Yeah.
and that's still not the case. It's just like we just refuse to accept that this is what it is or has to
Yeah.
be, right? And it's like
And
especially as an entrepreneur, it's like, no, 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 you get to make your own rules and you get to figure out what it is you
yeah.
want to do.
Yeah. And I also feel like the school system has a big role in that too. Like if you even think about in high school, they bring you to these like or they have these like career
Job
classes and
fairs,
like
right?
yeah and then you like take quizzes for like what you should be growing like when you grow up and then when you go to school you apply for one specialty or one degree max two maybe if you have like a minor in
Mm.
something and you're expected to do that as your job until you retire. And so I feel
True.
like society has kind of put people who are multi-passionate and like creatives kind of in a box. And it's almost like we're at a stage now where people are realizing that and just wanting to kind of rebel out of that.
Yeah. Or we realize like that was like that's our parents' generation. That's not
Hmm.
us for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that that's part of your story. And I think, over time, like it's gonna just be another no big deal.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
it already is. I feel like you're kind of like embracing it and like it's fine. And it
Yeah.
truly is. Because I don't think like from the outside looking in, I'm not going like, oh, she's like doing something else. And like, no, it's so inspiring.
Yeah. Thank
It's so
you.
inspiring. And it kind of shows other creatives that like you can figure out what your path looks like and that it isn't linear and then it's like it's very much
Hmm.
like a wave and loops and circles. And that's totally normal, especially like for creative people.
Yeah. And I think the cool thing is that I've been documenting my journey through
Mm.
all these different transitions on social media the past, like, I want to say like 5 or 6 years. And to your point, like I always, anytime I'm like announcing this new transition, I guess you can say, that there's a lot of shame around that. And I think every single time, like people reach out and they're like, this is so cool. Like, oh, like I wish I could do that. And so it's just really validating to know that just like my story and journey is at least like resonating with someone out there. And it's
Mhm.
like giving them the permission that that's okay too.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. They're like, you're not, yeah, there's so many, but they're just like, they're not able to like share that, right? Or be public about
Hmm.
it, but they definitely find it inspiring. So
Yeah.
you're okay, so you're pivoting again. And I know I was on your website and you're like, but I'm doing a new one. I'm like, I think it's beautiful. Like
Thank
I know
you.
you're recreating things. And so
Yeah.
you are doing for interior designers, you're doing like web branding, supporting interior
Hmm.
designers in that capacity. So what's happening now?
Yeah. Yeah. So I wouldn't say this is like a whole like new pivot where I'm doing something completely different, but I think what I really like realized over the past few years of all these different transitions and like what that consistent like through line has been is that I just love helping people really show up as who they are in the online space, whatever that looks like. And so if you're an interior designer, that might be branding a web. For someone who's a personal brand, that might be like content creation. And so this new evolution is me really supporting people who are like me, who are multi-passionate, who are highly creative. And it's almost like you have put yourself into a box
Mm.
and you're wanting to just like scream and get out of that box and show all the sides of you that make you you, but still make sense of all of that
Mm.
in the online space. Because I think a lot of the times people are like, okay, well, I'm an interior designer, but I also love health and nutrition and I love like fashion and I want to share all these things. But if I share it, it's going to confuse people because I'm an interior designer. And it's almost like we put so much emphasis on the labels that we put on
Yes.
ourselves.
And like for
And
our
we feel like we
identities,
can't,
right? Because we have
yes. And we
multiple
feel like,
identities, but how do you
yes,
show them all?
show all of that. Yeah. And so I'm really wanting to support people who are in that position where they might already have like a business or a brand out there, but they're just wanting to show more of that. And how can we create this kind of holistic ecosystem online that includes your brand, that includes your website, that includes like your content and make sense of all of that while not burning yourself out to the ground and having a fulfilling life that allows you to pursue all of your other just like passions and hobbies outside of work.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that because I think marketing, like sort of old school, has been like, no, 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 you got to pick one lane and you got to stay in that lane and you got to
Yes.
like blow that up because if you bring in other areas, it like dilutes it. People won't get
Yeah.
it. And maybe that was true back then, but I think now, no, like consumers are so much more open-minded and they're looking for
Hmm.
the humanity behind the brand and the person. And that is like, that is multifaceted. It's not just like one
Yeah.
interest or one industry, right? They want to know like
Yes.
what makes it all tick. And
Hmm.
yeah, so I think that's awesome. I think that's really
Yeah.
important.
Thank you. Yeah. And I even think about like real life examples of people that are, let's say, in the design space who are doing this. Like when we think about like I Swoon, Athena Calderon, like she, I would say, is known, I guess, for being in the design space, but she also has a recipe book.
Mm.
And she talks about fashion and she talks about like how she curates spaces for people to gather, right? She's like really big on hosting. But then there's also like Studio McGee where
Yes.
Shay, like she, I would say is like we know her for interior design, but I've been seeing her post more about health and wellness. She's been posting more about fashion. And it's just so cool to see these other kind of like industry leaders that are also kind of branching out of what
Hmm.
they're known for,
Hmm.
because I think we're just all creatives who don't want to feel trapped and boxed in. And we're almost like anti-niche.
Hmm. Hmm. So it's like showing more of that lifestyle and not just like the specific
Yeah.
industry or one specific vein of like a brand's
Hmm.
business. It's like the entire integrative process of it
That,
and everything that's
yeah.
included.
Yeah, and also just like how to not confuse your audience when you are sharing more of those things. And even like what are some additional opportunities that you can build for yourself beyond that like one service that you're offering? Like interior designers, I think they just see their service as like full service design, or I don't know, like furnish and style as like the key services. But it's like if you share more of like who you are and all your passions, can you branch out into doing more like coaching? Can you branch
Mm.
out into affiliate marketing? Can you branch out into doing more like brand partnerships or doing more speaking? Like there's so many other avenues of, I guess, like monetization and opportunities beyond just like the single skill set or single, I guess, service that you're offering. And it's like, how can people realize that potential for themselves?
Hmm. Hmm. I love it. I love it. It sounds like something I'm interested in, actually.
We could chat.
Definitely. I'm
Yeah.
like, yes, because like as you go into sort of like your 2.0 or your 3.0 career, you don't want to, I don't want to give up like design 100%, but I definitely don't want to
Mhm.
make it like the focus and sort of like that anchor in my life anymore.
Everything.
I'm ready to sort of
Yeah.
like let that be free and move
Yeah.
on to other things. But it
Totally.
is like a massive part, obviously, of like what makes me tick and where my interests lie and
Hmm.
my passions are. But yeah, there's more layers to it than just
Yeah.
interior design.
Totally. Yeah, you're a
Awesome.
whole being. Your
That's
whole
true.
life is not just design.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything as we sort of wrap things up, is there any last little like bits of like wisdom, little nuggets you want to share with people?
Mm.
I know we talked about a lot.
Yeah. I think the biggest advice that I have for people is just to trust yourself. Like if something feels off, like it's probably a telltale sign that something is off. And so it's like, how can you step back and really get more into alignment with yourself? And I think self-trust is something that is really hard to do as
Yes.
entrepreneurs because we're always looking at like what everyone else is doing and we compare ourselves. But it's like, how can you just really trust yourself and really own the decisions that you're making in your business and career?
Hmm. I will say I can speak to experience of this. Turning 40, like I just turned 43. But
Mm.
once you get like 35 and over, I don't know how old you are, but like 35 is a magical number. And then when you get to 40, I tell you, like the level of like you don't care. You really don't care half
Yeah.
as much as you used to. Other people's like external opinions, what everybody else is doing, like you kind of like keep a pulse on what's happening, but it
Hmm.
doesn't derail you or drive you the way that it does when you're younger and you're trying to find your own way. And like you're literally trying to find
Hmm.
your own identity and just like who you are. And as you get older, it becomes so much easier to just be like,
Whatever.
you know,
Yeah.
kind of whatever.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do my own thing. Thank you so much for your opinion. I'm just gonna park it over here because I'm doing this. And I think
Hmm.
that just like with age, we just become more comfortable in our own
Totally.
skin. And we have now experience, to sort of back us up. And
Yeah.
you're much more likely to like embrace that for yourself versus letting everybody else sort of like push you and pull
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting
I
older is
think,
awesome.
no, totally. I just turned 30, but even then, like, I definitely have felt that shift. And I
Yeah.
think in your early 20s, you just care so much about like what everyone else thinks
Yes.
about you,
Like
or like,
pleasing everybody,
yeah. And
but
it's
at
like
your own
you,
expense.
And like when you, I don't know, like hit a milestone, you always feel like you want to share it on social media because you want other people to kind of like perceive you as like, oh, she has her stuff together, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, as I get older, and I also think with just like more life experience and just having just like, I don't know, going through life in
Mhm.
general and seeing just like people getting older and just like what I value, I think I just honestly value like time and space with people that I love. And it's like,
Mhm.
who cares about the rest of it? Like that
Mhm.
all really doesn't matter.
Yeah, your perspective changes. And I think like
Hmm.
your goals and just like what is important. I think after coming out of
Yeah, and your
COVID too,
values.
definitely
Hmm.
after COVID, like I know for so many
Yeah.
people I've talked to, like everything just shifted and everything, because
Yeah.
everything like ground to a halt. Is that how you say it? Just came to a like
Hmm.
screeching
Came to a
halt.
halt. Yeah.
Like we hadn't up until that point, truly, for most of us, had that chance to just sort of like take a breath and calm
Hmm.
down and kind of just like look around and be like, what am I doing? And what is
Hmm.
the point? What
Hmm.
is the what's the meaning of life?
Purpose. Yeah,
And so
totally.
many people had sort of come out of that period in time thinking like, no, I'm gonna do things differently, or this, dream I have in the back of my mind, I'm going for it. And because life
Hmm.
is short, time is short, and it's truly, like doing things for yourself and finding
Yeah.
what is in alignment with you and your values is so much more important than putting things out there and getting like external validation for something
Hmm.
that doesn't maybe truly light you up.
Yeah, I can't agree more with that.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. I think though you sound like though, like even though you're 30, you have the wisdom of like a 40, 45-year-old because you've just done
Oh,
so many
thank
things.
you.
As all those past experiences added years to your
Yeah.
life. There you go.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because like in my friend group, I'm people always joke that I'm the grandma. Like I am
The old
such a
soul.
homebody. Yeah, I am like I don't want to go out. I don't want to drink. Like I just want to be on my sofa with a candle, with a nice meal, like being in front of my TV. Totally
Yeah.
an old soul.
Just comfort. It's all about the
Yeah.
comfort. I agree. I like it. I'm like, yeah, Friday afternoon, Friday night, people are like, let's go. I'm like, I'm in
Yeah,
my
I'm like,
sweats.
no.
You
I'm
cannot
gonna be
drag me out
yeah,
of my house tonight.
I
Sorry.
know. Me
It's not
too.
happening. I hear
Yeah.
you. So why don't,
Yeah.
before we go, tell everybody where we can find you, Tiff.
Yeah, I am at by Tiff C on literally every platform. So I'm like, again, do a lot of things. So YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, I would say are like my three primary ones. And they can also find me at bytiffc.com to learn a little bit more about like my services and like what I do. Again, I am like revamping a little bit. So I am going to be releasing a new website probably within like the next 2 weeks or so. But yeah, that is where everyone can find me.
So if you're thinking I need to revamp my lifestyle, my brand, my lifestyle.
But everything.
Whoa, what am I saying here? Yeah, I need to revamp like my website, my business, my brand.
Yeah.
Or maybe you've been thinking, you know what, I want to branch out and include other arms into my business, but I don't know how
Hmm.
to market it or
Yeah.
convey that, in a message that is consistent and fluid. Reach out to Tiff and just have a conversation with
Hmm.
her because I think she's going to have a lot of amazing ideas for you. And just
Yeah.
from talking with her, like she's someone who just genuinely cares. She's just very
Hmm.
authentic, very real. She'll tell you if it's gonna work, not gonna work.
Yeah.
Like she did with my pricing when I asked her in my Instagram DM. Yeah. No, you're just like
Yeah.
wonderful and lovely. And I thank you so much for
Thank you.
spending a little bit of time with me this afternoon. And I look forward
Oh.
to seeing your new website when it's launched.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this chat.
Perfect. All right. Well, have a good rest of your day and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
See ya.